there is a silence before every storm. But with a Scorpio, that silence is the storm. Most people don't understand this. They think anger is loud, explosive, and dramatic. They imagine broken plates, raised voices, slammed doors. But for a Scorpio, none of that is necessary. Their anger is a weapon so sharp it doesn't need to scream to cut. And what if I told you that when a Scorpio gets angry, it's never because of what just happened, but because of what you never even noticed you did? You see, Scorpio doesn't erupt like fire. They burn quietly. They boil beneath the surface. They remember things you forgot the minute they happened, and they store them, not to punish you later, but because their soul refuses to let lies go unaccounted for. That's the terrifying beauty of a Scorpio's wrath. It's not random, it's not reckless, it's precise, cosmic, ancient. It's the reaction of a soul who trusted and was betrayed, of a spirit who warned you and was ignored. Most people have no idea they've crossed the line until the Scorpio disappears. Or worse, they speak one sentence that destroys everything you believed about yourself, not out of cruelty, but out of truth. Scorpio's anger is the final alarm bell that rings when every other signal was missed. Their anger isn't the problem, it's the symptom of your silence, your betrayal, your inconsistency. Let me ask you some things. Have you ever felt a Scorpio shift toward you? One day they were open, intense, focused. The next, cold, blank, unreadable. You didn't know it yet, but the shift had begun. The transformation was underway. And this is where most people fail. They confuse that silence for indifference. They think Scorpio is overreacting. They don't realize Scorpio is never reacting, they're revealing. They are showing you the consequences of every choice you made while they watched in silence, remembering everything. So today I'm going to tell you something most people will never say out loud. Scorpio's anger is not the problem. It's the moment you finally see what your actions have created. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of that Scorpio wrath, you know, you can't lie your way out, you can't cry your way out, you can't beg your way back. Because by the time Scorpio's angry, they've already let go of the version of you they once believed in. In the next few minutes, we're going to uncover 7 dark truths about Scorpio's anger that most people don't want to face. These truths are uncomfortable, but they're also necessary. Because if you don't understand how and why a Scorpio gets angry, you'll never understand what it truly means to be loved by one. Let's begin. Dark truth number 1. Scorpio never gets angry until the pain is too loud to ignore. They say Scorpio is intense. They say Scorpio has a temper. They say Scorpio takes things too personally. But what they never say is this: Scorpio doesn't get angry easily. They get wounded deeply. The truth is, most Scorpios don't want to fight. They're not looking for conflict. They're looking for honesty, depth, loyalty, energy that's real. And when they choose to trust someone, that trust is everything. But here's the dangerous part. When Scorpio is hurt, they don't tell you right away. They observe. They wait. They ask themselves, did I misunderstand? They give you the benefit of the doubt. Because at their core, Scorpio is loyal to a fault. They will fight for someone long after that person has stopped fighting for them. So when the first crack appears, Scorpio doesn't explode. They internalize it, they bury it, they try to heal it privately. But what happens when that pain grows? What happens when that betrayal repeats itself not once but twice? Then 3 times. Scorpio doesn't shout. They shrink away. They pull back. They become distant, cold, and unpredictable. You don't see the fire, but you feel the temperature change. Because here's the truth most people miss. Scorpio's anger doesn't come from rage. It comes from disappointment, from heartbreak, from giving you every chance and watching you waste it. By the time Scorpio gets angry, it's already too late. You weren't listening when they were quiet. You weren't watching when they withdrew. You didn't care when they gave subtle warnings. Now, the soul you once had access to is shutting the gates. And that anger, it's not about control, it's not about power, it's about grief. It's a roar of spiritual heartbreak. It's the sound of a soul saying, I trusted you with my energy, and you didn't respect it. So, if you ever want to understand a Scorpio's anger, don't look at the moment they exploded. Look at the 1,000 moments before, when they stayed silent, loyal, and forgiving. Because that's where the storm began. Life lesson. Anger is the language of wounded loyalty. We live in a world that rushes to label emotion. When someone is quiet, we say they're cold. When someone is angry, we say they're dramatic. But rarely do we stop and ask, what is the origin of that anger? Scorpio teaches us something powerful, that not all anger is loud. Not all anger is evil. Some anger is the sacred fire of a soul that has loved too much, given too long, and stayed too silent. And if we're wise, we don't just fear the Scorpio's sting, we learn from it. Because the deeper truth is this: people don't explode for no reason. The ones who suddenly walk away have usually been hurting quietly for far too long. So the lesson here is not just how to avoid Scorpio's wrath, it's how to become better humans in every relationship we enter. Learn to see the subtle signals. Learn to hear the silence. Don't wait for someone to raise their voice before you begin to care. Don't wait until they're angry to start respecting their soul. Because in the end, we are all someone's Scorpio. And how we treat the loyalty we're given will determine who stands by us when the storm finally comes. Dark truth. Number 2, their anger is surgical, not emotional. Most people think anger is a loss of control. They think it's all shouting tears, fists on the table. But a Scorpio's anger is different. It doesn't scream, it calculates. It doesn't lash out, it cuts precisely where it hurts the most. Scorpio's wrath is not the fire of a child, it's the scalpel of a soul surgeon. And by the time they're angry with you, they already know exactly what to say and what not to say to change your world forever. Have you ever had someone say one sentence and it shattered you more than an entire argument? That's Scorpio. They don't need 1,000 words to explain why you hurt them. They only need one truth, and they deliver it like lightning in a bottle. Here's why Scorpio's mind is constantly recording, observing, feeling. But they don't just react in the moment. They absorb. They analyze patterns. They read between every line. So when the moment comes when they finally release their anger, you're not facing a tantrum. You're facing a verdict. Not from rage, but from full awareness. Because a Scorpio doesn't just want you to know how they feel, they want you to face who you are. And the way they deliver that truth, it's not to wound randomly, it's to reveal where your mask cracked. That's why a Scorpio's anger hits harder than anyone else's. Because while others argue to defend themselves, Scorpio speaks to expose you. Let me give you an example. There once was a woman who loved deeply, always giving, always loyal. She was a Scorpio. Her partner betrayed her emotionally over and over, but never admitted it. He gaslighted her, told her she was too sensitive, reading into things paranoid. And for months, she said nothing. She smiled, supported him, held the relationship together, until one night when he accused her of being distant. She didn't yell. She looked him in the eye and said, "I stopped talking when I realized you only listen to lies you tell yourself, and I refuse to be another one." Then she walked away. No explosion, no chaos, just the surgical slice of truth, clean, irreversible, final. That is a Scorpio's anger. It doesn't want revenge, it wants clarity. It doesn't seek to destroy you, it wants to release itself from the illusion you forced them to carry. Because Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, the planet of destruction and rebirth, they don't stay angry for sport. They get angry to transform. And sometimes that transformation includes cutting ties with you so they can finally breathe again. Life lesson: don't fear the blow, fear the truth behind it. We often fear someone's reaction, but forget to ask, what truth did they finally speak that I kept avoiding? A Scorpio doesn't explode randomly. They erupt surgically because they've already mapped the entire landscape of your betrayal. Their anger teaches us that there's a difference between reaction and revelation. One is unconscious, the other is sacredly chosen. So here's your invitation. If someone calls you out with clarity, if their words hit deeper than you expected, stop and ask, did I just feel pain, or did I just hear the truth I've been running from? Because the ones who love you most are often the ones who will tell you what no one else dares to say. And in that moment, their anger isn't cruelty, it's a mirror. And maybe that's the most merciful thing they could have given you. Dark truth, number 3, Scorpio remembers everything you forgot. You might forget what you said, you might brush off what you did, you might not even remember the moment that shifted everything, but a Scorpio does. They remember the look in your eyes when you lied. They remember the tone in your voice when you dismissed their feelings. They remember the pause before you said, it's not a big deal. Because for Scorpio, nothing is ever just a moment. Every word, every action, every contradiction, it all means something. And that's what makes their anger so unnerving. It's not based on what's happening now, it's a reaction to everything they've been keeping quiet about for far too long. Scorpio doesn't need to dig for dirt. They already have the emotional record of everything you've done, not out of obsession, but out of survival. They've been hurt before, they've been betrayed before, and every scar taught them to pay attention, to watch the signs, to feel the shifts, to remember the patterns others conveniently forget. So by the time Scorpio is angry, they're not guessing they know. They know that you didn't just lie once. You lied the same way you lied last time. You disappeared with the same excuse. You made the same promise with a different mask. And what most people don't understand is this Scorpio's memory isn't just mental, it's cellular. It lives in their body, in their gut, in their soul. That's why they're so hard to fool and even harder to heal once the trust is broken. Because they didn't forget. They just stayed quiet until the pain outgrew the silence. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio man who loved his best friend like a brother. They had known each other for 10 years, but over time the friend started making little jokes at his expense in front of others. Each time the Scorpio smiled, laughed it off, didn't say a word. But he remembered. He remembered how it started small, a joke here, a jab there, until one day at a party, the friend made a cruel comment that crossed the line. That night, the Scorpio said nothing, but the next morning, he was gone. From the chat, from the calls, from the friendship. And when someone asked him why he overreacted, he simply replied, "This wasn't about last night. It was about every night I stayed silent so he could keep laughing." That's Scorpio. They won't always tell you what you did wrong, but they'll feel it every single time you do it. And once that emotional ledger is full, they will make one swift decision without warning, without guilt, without turning back. Life lesson. The soul remembers what the ego forgets. In life, we often assume that people will forget if we minimize, distract, or move on. But the soul doesn't work that way. Not the soul of a Scorpio, and not the soul of anyone who feels deeply and loves honestly. This truth teaches us a sacred lesson. You don't have to hurt someone with fire to burn them. Sometimes you burn them by pretending nothing happened. And those emotional burns, they don't heal with silence. They heal with accountability, with empathy, with truth. So if someone walks away and you don't understand why, look backward, look inward, and ask, what did I forget that they never could? Because in relationships, what's remembered in silence often becomes the reason someone leaves without a word. Dark truth, number 4, their silence is their loudest scream. You know what most people get wrong about Scorpio? They expect thunder. They expect fire, fury, chaos. But Scorpio doesn't need to yell to destroy you. They don't need to argue. They don't even need to explain. They go silent. And in that silence, you begin to hear everything you were never willing to face before. Because when a Scorpio is angry, they don't always confront you. They vanish. They pull back into themselves like a tide before a tsunami, not to run away, but to observe, to recalibrate, to detach. And here's the dark truth that silence is not peace. It's their power returning home. You might feel relieved at first. You might think, at least they didn't yell. But make no mistake, when a Scorpio goes quiet, it's because they've already said everything they needed to energetically. The words you ignored, the signals you dismissed, the hurt you thought they'd get over, all of it lives inside that silence like a locked vault you never bothered to open. And now it's sealed, and you are no longer invited. Because Scorpio's silence is not passive, it's sacred distance, a withdrawal of spirit, a final act of emotional self-preservation. It's not to hurt you, it's to save themselves. Let me tell you about Camille, a Scorpio woman I once knew. She was in a long-term relationship with a man who constantly interrupted her, dismissed her, laughed off her concerns. She tried for years to express herself, to fight for connection, to be heard. But one day she stopped talking, not because she had nothing to say, but because she knew it no longer mattered. When he asked what was wrong, she said, "Nothing." But her tone said everything. Her eyes said everything. Her silence was louder than any fight they'd ever had, and 2 weeks later, she left. No drama, no letter, just a Scorpio, reclaiming her voice by refusing to waste it any longer. That's what people don't understand. Scorpio's silence is not weakness. It's the end of an era. It's the moment their soul decides, I've already told you what I needed to now. I'll let the consequences speak for me. Life lesson: silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's protection. We often confuse someone's quietness with forgiveness. We think if they're not fighting us, they're fine. But Scorpio teaches us a truth many refuse to face. Silence can be a boundary. Silence can be grief. Silence can be the moment they finally gave up trying to make you understand. In a world obsessed with speaking, Scorpio reminds us the loudest truth often comes with no sound at all. So the lesson is this: don't wait for the scream. Don't wait for the fight. If someone goes quiet, especially someone who used to care deeply, ask yourself what message they already tried to send before their silence had to deliver it for them. Because sometimes silence isn't the absence of love, it's the proof that love was no longer safe there. Dark truth, revive. They don't retaliate immediately, they observe. Scorpio is often misunderstood as vengeful. People imagine them plotting in the dark, scheming ways to get even, but that's not the whole truth. What Scorpio actually does is watch. They don't strike when they're first hurt. They don't react the moment the betrayal stings. They fall quiet. Their eyes narrow not in rage, but in analysis. Because Scorpio knows this one cosmic truth: what you do once might be a mistake, but what you do twice, that's your pattern. And Scorpio is a master of reading patterns. When most signs rush to defend themselves, Scorpio gathers data. They let you talk. They let you dig your own hole. They let you believe they didn't notice the shift in your tone, the inconsistencies in your story, the delay in your energy. But inside, they're memorizing every piece of your character, not to use it against you, but to determine whether you ever deserved their trust in the first place. It's the opposite of impulsive. It's spiritual surveillance. And that's what makes them so dangerous, not because they want to destroy you, but because they wait. And when they do act, it's already too late for you to plead, explain, or rewrite the narrative. You see, Scorpio doesn't retaliate in real time. They don't slap back, they step back. They don't scream, they study. Let me give you an example. There was a Scorpio employee who noticed her coworker subtly taking credit for her ideas. In meetings, in emails, in casual conversations, Nothing loud, nothing obvious, but enough to sting. She didn't complain. She didn't expose him right away. She watched. She kept notes. She made copies. She documented every misalignment. And months later, when the time was right, she handed it all to the board during her promotion interview. No drama, no vengeance, just facts. Her quiet observations spoke louder than any emotional outburst ever could. And she didn't just get the promotion, she got something vraiment, even more Scorpio respect without noise. That's the lesson most people miss. Scorpio's silence isn't passivity, it's patience. It's the choice to understand someone fully before deciding what they deserve. They don't need to destroy your reputation. They'll simply withdraw their energy and leave you exposed to your own reflection. Life lesson. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response. In a reactive world, Scorpio shows us the power of restraint. When everyone else is triggered, defending, explaining, Scorpio reminds us, true strength doesn't live in reaction, it lives in discernment. Not every betrayal deserves a battle. Some just need to be witnessed, remembered, and left to karma. And sometimes the greatest justice is letting someone reveal exactly who they are while you sit in your quiet knowing. So if you ever feel the urge to react instantly, pause, watch, learn. Because Scorpio's way isn't always loud, but it is accurate. And in life, observation is sometimes the most sacred act of power. Dark truth. 6. They test your soul through your reaction. When Scorpio gets angry, most people only see the surface, the cold stare, the sharp silence, the precision of their words. But beneath all of that lies a deeper mystery. Because Scorpio doesn't just get angry at you, they're watching how you respond to their anger. And that response, that tells them everything they need to know about your soul. You see, Scorpio doesn't test people in obvious ways. They don't give you a checklist, a warning, or a heads up. They simply allow situations to unfold and observe who you become when tension rises. Do you get defensive? Do you lie? Do you shift blame? Do you dismiss their pain as overreacting? Or do you own your mistake? Do you stay present even when it's uncomfortable? Do you seek truth over saving face? Because here's the dark truth. Scorpio's anger isn't a tantrum, it's a spiritual X-ray. It reveals not just how much you care, but how honest you are under pressure. And to a Scorpio, that's the ultimate test of character. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio man named Elijah. He had a friend he trusted deeply until one day he discovered that this friend had shared something personal behind his back. Elijah didn't yell. He didn't confront immediately. He waited and then brought it up calmly. And the friend, instead of apologizing, he said, "Man, you're always so sensitive. It wasn't even a big deal." That was it. The test had been failed. Because Elijah wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for integrity. He was looking for someone who could sit with discomfort and say, "You're right. I crossed a line, and I'm sorry." But when that didn't happen, Scorpio didn't argue. He simply withdrew, not because of the betrayal itself, but because of the lack of accountability that followed. That's the soul of a Scorpio. They understand that everyone makes mistakes, but what matters more is what you do after the mistake. How you show up when you're no longer the hero in their eyes. Because Scorpio doesn't just want a partner, a friend, or a lover. They want someone who can handle truth, even when it's messy, even when it's humbling, especially when they're angry. Life lesson: who you become under pressure is who you really are. Scorpio teaches us that reactions reveal more than rehearsed words ever could. When someone confronts you, when emotions are raw, when you feel cornered, that's not the time to perform. It's the time to be real. Because people aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for sincerity, for self-awareness, for someone who says, "I see your pain, and I'll do better, And in this world of masks and shallow apologies, Scorpio invites us to go deeper, to own our flaws, to face the mirror, to answer their silence with our truth even when it shakes us. So the next time someone's hurt and you feel their distance, don't rush to defend. Instead, ask, what is this moment asking of my soul? Because how you react is how you'll be remembered. Dark truth, number 7, they transform through their rage. Most people think of anger as destruction, as something to avoid, something to suppress, something that burns everything to the ground. But for Scorpio, anger is alchemy. It doesn't just destroy, it transforms. It doesn't just burn, it purifies. It's not just fire for the sake of fire. It's the fire of rebirth. Because here's the deepest, darkest truth of all. Scorpio doesn't just feel rage, they rise through it. Their anger is not a weakness, it's a sacred threshold, the space between who they were and who they're about to become. When a Scorpio reaches that breaking point, when the pain, betrayal, and silence are too heavy to hold, something extraordinary happens. They let go, not in pieces, not in half measures, but completely. They burn the identity that was attached to the relationship. They burn the hopes they once held. They burn the version of themselves that once tolerated less than they deserved. And from those ashes, a new Scorpio emerges, sharper, quieter, stronger, more focused, more dangerous, but also more liberated. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio woman named Dana. For years, she stayed in a relationship that made her feel invisible. She gave, she waited, she forgave, again and again, until one night she caught her partner lying not just once, but deeply, repeatedly. She didn't yell, she didn't beg. She sat in silence for weeks until the day came. She packed her bags, left the house, changed her number, and disappeared. But that wasn't the transformation. The real shift happened in the months that followed. When Dana cut her hair short, launched her own business, started therapy, stopped apologizing, and finally became the version of herself that pain had been preparing her for. When people asked what happened, she smiled and said, "I died and came back with better boundaries." That's Scorpio. Their rage doesn't consume them. It awakens them. It rearranges them. It sculpts them into something closer to their truth. Because at the end of the day, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth. They are the phoenix, the sign that must burn in order to fly. So when you see a Scorpio go silent, and then return with new eyes, new rules, new energy, don't be surprised. They didn't just get over you, they evolved beyond you. And no, they're never going back. Life lesson: the fire that burns you might be the fire that frees you. We've been taught to fear anger, to see it as something shameful. But Scorpio teaches us a deeper spiritual truth. Anger isn't the end, it's a doorway, a catalyst, a sacred eruption that clears space for the soul to finally breathe. When someone hits their limit, when they walk away, not because they hate you, but because they love themselves more than your comfort. That's not destruction, that's resurrection. So, if you're in a season of rage, if you're tired of being quiet, tolerant, forgiving to a fault, ask yourself, what am I being called to burn so that I can finally become who I was always meant to be? Because Scorpio shows us the real power is not in staying calm. The real power is knowing when to rise from your own ashes. Life reflection, the soul behind Scorpio's fire. So now you've heard the 7 dark truths about a Scorpio's anger. But here's the deeper question we rarely ask. What are we supposed to learn from all of this? Because this isn't just about astrology. It's not about blaming a sign for being too intense or too hard to handle. This is about recognizing the sacred patterns of human emotion and honoring the depth of the soul that lives inside a Scorpio. Let me tell you something the world rarely admits. Scorpio doesn't want to be angry. They don't enjoy cutting people off. They don't thrive on drama or revenge. What they truly want is truth, honesty, depth, loyalty, realness. A soul they can trust enough to collapse into, a person who sees the shadows in them and doesn't run, someone who says, "I'm not afraid of your silence, I'm here for your soul." But when the world gives them lies, half-efforts, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation, they don't protest with noise, they transform through distance. Because Scorpio's anger isn't just a reaction, it's a teacher, a mirror, a spiritual message that says some things must die for something real to finally live. And that's where we find the final unspoken truth. Scorpio's anger is sacred because it leads to their freedom. If you've ever known a Scorpio who walked away from you, understand this. They probably didn't do it out of hate. They did it out of respect for themselves. They gave you every chance. They warned you in silence. They waited for your soul to meet them halfway. And when that didn't happen, they didn't destroy you. They simply evolved without you. And maybe, just maybe, that was your lesson too. Final life lesson. If you fear a Scorpio's anger, you never understood their love. This is the most powerful lesson Scorpio has to offer. Their wrath is never random. Their silence is never empty. And their transformation is never without reason. If you are lucky enough to be loved by a Scorpio, don't wait until they're angry to start appreciating them. Don't ignore the subtleties, the patterns, the energy shifts. Don't treat their intensity like a flaw, because the same fire that can destroy you is the same fire that once lit up every corner of your life with loyalty, passion, and protection. So ask yourself, have I been present enough to notice what someone isn't saying? Have I been accountable enough to hear pain before it turns into distance? Because the truth is, we all have a little Scorpio in us. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop fearing that fire and start understanding it. If this message stirred something in you, if you've ever felt misunderstood, silenced, or burned by someone's inability to see your worth, drop a comment below. We read every story. And if you're ready to understand more about the mystery of Scorpio, subscribe now, because this journey, it's only just beginning. This is the path to Buddha wisdom, and in the house of Scorpio, even fire can become a form of healing.